Okay. Hello there. I'm hoping, can you hear me? Let me pick up some comments from somewhere. Let me just find where they are. Hi, Marion. How are you? Hi, Andrea. Hi, Antonio. Is that a yes, Andrea, that you can hear me? Loud and clear. Oh, amazing. Brilliant. And I'll tell you why, because I've got a slightly different setup today. Wanted to try something a little bit different. And it just meant getting my picture and my sound coordinated together. It's been working on all of my practices, so I was just hoping that it would all come together for you today as well. So that sounds good, looks good to me. Brilliant. We have people tuning in on Facebook and also on YouTube as well, which is amazing. So it's great to have you here. Hi Margaret, hi Carol, hi Kathy, hi Lorraine, hi Kath, hi Marjorie, how are you? Hi Jean and Fiona. That's great. Oh, it looks like we're all working. Hi Barb, how is everybody today? It's actually quite sunny here today. I hope everybody is all settled in and nice and cosy where you are. It looks like my camera's a little bit on the wonk, is it? Just a tiny bit wonky. Let's see if I can just turn that ever so slightly. I can't have you cricking your necks watching me. There we are. That looks a little bit better to me now. Straightened you all up. Oh, hi Lisa. How are you? Lisa's on YouTube. Lisa's watching with us on YouTube. That's good. Is the sound and everything okay, Lisa? Does it all look all right? So I've had a little bit of a change around of things. So fingers crossed everything will all go smoothly for me this afternoon. Say only a little technology change around in the background, something I've been trying out all week. So I'm hoping we'll actually get a better picture for the duration of this. So hi Connie, how are you? All looking good, perfect. Hi Julie, you need cheering up. Oh dear. Well, I shall do my best for you. Nothing too tricky today, but what I really did want to show you and perhaps introduce some of you to maybe for the first time, who knows, is the Framed Poinsettia die, and it comes with an insert, a Framed Poinsettia embossing folder and the layering stencil. So it comes with a collection, but the embossing folder this time around actually comes with an inset die, not a separate die. And I wanted to bring this to you today also because if you were able to watch any of the shows on Create and Craft yesterday, or I think it was the 2 o'clock show on Create and Craft yesterday, this would have actually been at an amazing price. So hopefully some of you may have purchased it yesterday and are waiting for it to turn up, or you may have had this from the first time that it was launched and you may or may not have been able to use it sort of in the meantime. So I've just got 2 ways to show you how to use it today. When I put the invite up for this live today, somebody also said that they had just a couple of issues lining up the stencils and they weren't perhaps getting the effect out of it that they wanted. So hopefully just by watching me do this, I can just perhaps iron out a few of those issues that you may be having. The stenciling set itself is just 3 stencils, so it's possibly one of the easiest set of stencils, I would say. So it only comes with just 3 stencils, but you get an amazing effect from it as well. Now, because of the nature of the stencils, there's so much detail on here as well that it actually took me a couple of minutes just to work out where all of the numbers were on the stencils. So I'll just run through that for you, just in case you're having that same issue as well. We have, say, 3 stencils. This is the first one, and you can see the number sitting just there. Let me just bring that to the camera a little bit. Hopefully, if I just tilt it to the light, but it's actually in the middle of one of the sides there. So if you're holding it with the holes down the left-hand side like a book, the number should be sitting there. If you've got it the wrong way around, you may need to just turn it over. So you have number 1 there. Now this is stencil number 2, and let me just bring a darker card behind. Oh, there we go. Easier said than done with one hand. There we are. So if I just bring this in, I'll just show you just how fine this stencil is. It's super fine, and I think it's this one that people have perhaps just need to see in use a little bit. I could say it's ever so fine, but the number on this one is actually sitting here on the spine. So again, you may need to turn it over, but this one you'll be able to orientate it a lot easier because you have the aperture is blacked out from the embossing folder there. So you have stencil number 2, which is sitting there on the spine. And then stencil number 3, I'll just bring this on here as well. It's a lot more solid, a lot more robust, this stencil, but you have the number sitting there at the top. So I think with this set in particular, it's always worth just finding where those are, getting all your numbers all in line, your stencils all in order, and then you're all ready to go. I tell you that mainly because the first card I made with this today, which was this one here, you may notice that it's turned around slightly because I actually picked it all up the wrong way and embossed it back to front as well. So this card is actually showing you debossed detail. Still looks perfectly lovely. It still works just as well, and I'm just able to turn the aperture on the side just to accommodate the text a little bit more. So that was the reason why I went through that for you. Then you have your 3D embossing folder, which looks like any regular 6x6 inch folder from Lisa. But this time around, you will notice that instead of having a separate die, you actually have the insert die there, which is actually stuck to the embossing folder. And if you hold it this way around, you'll see that just through the folder plastic there, it is held in place with a strip of double-sided tape. So excuse me excuse me, there's no need to remove that die, so that is there ready to use and in place for you. So unlike actually other embossing folders, every time you use this embossing folder, it will actually cut out the aperture for you. So what I wanted to do today, just show you 2 different ways. The cards are basically the same, just 2 different colorways for you. The idea of these cards is to be really quick batch made cards that I've used the same sentiment on both, just to make the stack of Christmas cards that you need to send out a little less daunting to make, and you can get through these a lot quicker. Now this one, you can see we have a solid front card. The aperture is actually backed with a nice dark coloured cardstock to complement the ink. This one, I've actually cut the aperture out and I've lined that with an acetate, so you actually have a window there so you can see through to the sentiment on the inside. So 2 basically the same cards, but they look very different. So that's why I think it's ideal to batch make with this, because if you change the colours up, which I will do with this card in particular, you can get a whole set of cards made really quickly in an afternoon, and you've gone a good way to creating those stash of Christmas cards that you may be selling on Christmas fairs, or that you just need to send out to friends and family over Christmas. So I shall bring in my Ultimate. So I'm using the Ultimate 2, And today I'm actually using it with the magnetic sheet. So it's been the first time that you see me use this on a live. And I'll talk through why later on actually. So it may help those who find the delicate nature of stencil number 2 just that little bit easier. So let me bring in the stencil packaging so we can see. Let's say I always like to refer back to the stencil packaging. I think that's a really useful tip as well. So, and there. So I have my piece of cardstock already cut. I'm actually using a pearlescent cream card because I thought that would go really nicely with the red this time round. But on both of these cards here, I've used Lisa's Super Smooth. So it's a lovely pure white card. Colours work perfectly well on both, of course. Now, when I was cutting this initial layer that I'm going to stencil onto, I sized it up to the embossing folder because I knew that I was going to make a square card. My square card blanks are just under 6-inch square. So when I made this layer to stencil onto, I actually measured the insert square of the embossing folder. What that will then enable me to do is to cut my matten layer, which for this card will be red, and I managed to cut that just a little bit larger. So I'll measure this up and show you now. So the white piece of card matches the inside square of the embossing folder. Then you can cut your matten layer to go on top of that. So that's just slightly smaller, and I just eyeballed that. And then because I'm using the 6x6 card blank, it meant that I could just cover the front of the card blank with gold card. Now, if you wanted to also die cut this layer, this gold glitter card layer before, or emboss it before putting it onto the card blank, then this layer actually is the size of the embossing folder from side to side. So that's how I managed to get my 3 layers, and that's how I managed to then make the nice neat layers around there. So I don't necessarily measure, I just do it all in relation to the cards and the materials and the equipment that I'm using. Maybe that's a lazy way of doing it, but to say it works for me. So when I start stenciling now, because my piece of card is smaller than the stencil, I just need to make sure that I line that up nice and evenly underneath. Now, again, many of you may have your preference on how to do this, and you may prefer using a much larger piece of cardstock that will definitely fit under your stencil, which you can then go back and trim, and that is a perfectly good way of doing it as well. So it's whatever works for you, basically. So this first layer is the centre of the flowers, and I'm going to add a point of difference with this, and I'm going to use the interference ink. So I've picked out the sweet treat, so I know that on a light coloured card or white coloured card this will turn out yellow. I'm using the blending sponge, and it's just a case of putting that through the stencil, nice and straightforward, like so. Now obviously, because this is the interference ink, when that dries you'll have a good amount of mica that will come to the fore, so put plenty of ink there so you really get the benefit of that shimmery ink. Now we do only have 3 stencils, but this is a very detailed stencil, and I would say this probably takes you the time on this particular project, so do take the time. Although they do come together quite quick, and you'll see on the second card this will come together really quick, but if you want to actually use a really nice colour and create a red or more of a solid colour, then do take your time on this layer. So I'm using Loganberry. This card I've used Rustic Coral, so that turns out really, although it looks pink on the ink front there, it turns out a really nice red, and you can layer that to create a lot of depth. But this time around, I'm using Loganberry just to make it look different. So I'm going to start off with a small amount of ink, and I'm starting off at the centre of the stencil here, because that gives me a chance to blot off any excess ink that I may have, and I'm just going really lightly. Now, because of the delicate nature of this stencil, and you can see that the actual detailing on the flowers is very, very slim, that if you come in too vigorously with your stencil brush, you are going to risk moving that a little bit too much, and then you end up with a bit of a blurry image. So just come in really, really gently on this. Now, if you find that this is too wobbly for you, or if you are just naturally a little bit more heavy-handed, which is, say, perfectly fine as well, there are workaways around this. Because I'm using the magnetic mat on the Ultimate 2, it means that I can use my magnets just to hold some of that stencil detail in place. And what I can do, I can use that and work around those stencils, and that just gives me that little bit more security. Now, obviously, if you are using the Ultimate 1, which has the stamping platform, it also has the magnetic back built in, so you'll be able to use this technique with that Ultimate as well. So go really gently, because you will notice that as you are moving your brush around, these details will move slightly. There's going to be an element of that, so don't be worried about that. But you do perhaps just want to secure it down a little bit. And I would suggest working in small areas at a time. You can use your fingers just to secure the edges. You can also, if you want to make it more secure, put your masking tape just around the edges so you know that your stencil won't move either. And that will just secure up those delicate details in the centre of the stencil as well. So if we move down to another area, I can move my magnets and just move back into another corner. Now I'm working from the centre out of each of the flowers, and you can see where each of the flowers are because we have these centre points already marked out. So that gives me a good starting point on where to start concentrating the colour and the ink. Now I like to work from the centre of the flower outwards, so I end up with more ink in the centre of the flower, and I work out towards the outside of the petal, and the ink gradually gets lighter. That's it's a technique that works with the way that I stencil. Some people prefer to have more ink on the tips of the petals and then work inwards. So if that's the way that you want to do that, then obviously that will work just as well for you as well. And then we can just start joining the pattern together with these centre areas. Again, go really, really gently. These brushes are very flexible, you'll see here when I just move that. But you'll see that when I'm actually stenciling, there is no flex going on with that brush, which means that I'm using it really, really lightly. But you can, this is why I say that this layer possibly takes a little bit longer than normal, because I am going so light, because I'm conscious of the delicate nature of the flowers. So I just wanted to show you that, and sort of show you in real time. Although these are good batch making cards, and they do actually come together quite quick, because once you've spent the time on this layer, it may seem like you're spending more time than normal. You really do only have one layer after that, which and then your card is done. So if you've already pre-prepared your design for this and prepped, you can just sit down and do all the stenciling all in the row. And actually, it might actually be a good way to get familiar with the pressure and how these stencils work. If you do one after the other, and you perhaps do a batch of 5 cards, by the end of it, you'll have the confidence and you'll be whizzing through this layer. So I'm just concentrating that ink there, and I say I'm using Loganberry this time, so it has a slightly more pinky hue than most poinsettias, but I think that works really nicely. Again, I think what I'll do, I'll just move my magnets down a little bit because then that keeps that detail a lot more secure. If you have more than 2 magnets, actually use those as well. I only have 2 available to me here, so I'm having to move them around. But if you have more, you may find that that works really well for you as well. Actually, another technique, if you are worried about how delicate this is as well, instead of going round and round and round and scrubbing the top of the stencil with your brush, just stroke it across. That way you have a lot more control again. And if you just stroke in one direction, you pull it down, you lift the brush off and then stroke it again, and you'll find again that your stencil will work really well with that. And as long as you stroke in the same direction each time, if there is any slight shift of these design, it will stay consistent because you're moving your brush in the same direction each time. So I'm hoping that gives you a few techniques on how to use this. So don't be frightened of it at all. Yes, this stencil is delicate, but Lisa equally uses a really strong mylar plastic to create these stencils. So although it's delicate and you do have to be careful with it, it's not so delicate that it's all rip and tear like if you was using a rice paper or a tissue paper or something like that, if you see what I mean. So I've added the colour there. Now before I move off, I'm going to come in with my brush and I'm just going to add a little bit more shading from the centre of the flowers outwards. Now it could be actually that you prefer to use these stencil brushes, and these stencil brushes do move the stencil less. So if you do have the time, it might be worth just persevering and going across the whole stencil with one of these stencil brushes, either this one or the next size up, which come in the chunky brushes. That may be another way that you'll just get the confidence in using this stencil. Okay, what's this? It would be lovely for a photo frame, wouldn't it, this? It would be really nice to create as a Christmas decoration to hang on a tree. It would be one of the larger ones, but it would make such a statement piece, wouldn't it? Particularly if you enclose the photo in the centre in acetate, then it will be something that could be brought out for years to come, which is always the fun part of Christmas, isn't it? To bring out those tree decorations that we are our favourites. So before I just move this, I'm going to use a stencil brush and I'm just going to work around all where this aperture is going to be, because what that will do is just give me like a shadow detail. So it may look a bit odd at this stage because it's quite an unusual shape. It's not like a regular aperture, but once you cut it out and we've got the rest of the design on, it all makes perfect sense. So you can just see that I'm just tilting that ink just over the center aperture there. So we're going to end up with a dark line all the way around, and I'll show you that in a second once I move the stencil out of the way. So there's an awful lot that you can do with this. I know it's only 3 stencils, so you may, be forgiven for thinking it might be not quite as detailed as other of Lisa's collections, but it really can be, and there's nothing stopping you adding extra colour on this as well, even on the one stencil. Now I've created sort of different colours by adding different layers of ink, but if you wanted to, let me just perhaps with the sweet treat, so I can just take what little bit of ink I have on the outside, and if I can just go into the center of the flowers and just try and add a little bit of color like that, I might need to pick up a little bit more ink actually, but as I say, just because we've only got the one detailed stencil on this doesn't mean that you can't add the extra color. So if I can just blend out a little bit more yellow into the center of these flowers, it just gives us that extra point of detail. Now this, I appreciate that what I'm doing is actually really subtle, but once I take the stencil away, it will be a lot more noticeable. And so particularly if you're doing this yourself and you can actually see it with your eye. Yeah, I'm doing that really gently. So now when I take that away, you can see just how much shading I've been able to get just with that one stencil. And just by working really gently, I've actually managed to put an awful lot of ink down. And we have the centre of the flowers obviously being the yellow, and just a slight hue of that yellow coming from around the centre. So if we come in with our last stencil now, this is adding the detail to the flowers. It's a lot more robust, this stencil, so I can come in with a lot more force, I would say. And I'm just going to use Loganberry all the way across. I'm not going to go too heavy because I quite like the veining of these flowers to be more subtle, but obviously that's a personal thing. So if you wanted to go heavier with this, then that would look lovely as well. So I'm just going to make sure that I get all the way across. I'm even going over the centre of the yellow flowers there, just to give them a slight hue, because that gives them a little bit of shading. Now I am holding the stencil down. Again, you could always put your magnets there and hold that in place as well. So let me just check that I've put enough ink down. I might just go in a little bit more with that. See, that's the beauty of using these Ultimate systems as well, isn't it? Because you do have that ability just to check on something and alter it as you go. And also, say if you're batch making, you may want to do one with a lot of ink on, you may want to do like a paler one. And with just one collection, you can create so many different looks really quite quickly. So I think I'll leave it at that. And that now just looks so pretty. And perhaps actually, if I bring that in alongside this one, you can just see different hueing, just slightly different colours. Say this is the Rustic Coral, which has a real pink, nice red to it. And this one is slightly pinkier, being the Loganberry. So depending on what you have in your stash there. So then let me just move that away. Now what I will do, I need to emboss and die cut this. Now obviously this will die cut at the same time. The die is attached to the embossing folder, but it really doesn't make it any harder to line up your design on the inside there. Make sure everything's lined up so we know that all our embossed lines will look perfect. There we are. Let me just put that through. Okay, so what we've done here, we've managed to emboss, and the centre detail comes out just as easy as any of Lisa's dies. So you know you've got that quality there also. So what we can do, we can layer this onto our red layer. So we have that coming through the centre. Now what you could do, you could emboss this with a completely different embossing folder. We have some other Christmas embossing folders that would work really well in there. Any of the ones with the vines or the leaves. I think we have Christmas postal marks as well. Any of the like wood grain ones would work. So I'm just going to attach that to the front of the card. Now say this is just really straightforward. I'm going to glue this straight onto this layer. You could use 3D foam to raise that up, but I'm conscious that a lot of the cards that I have to send do have to go through the post, and from Ireland to the UK it costs a fortune, so I will be keeping this flat. But I think the embossing does all that work for us, so we don't have to worry too much. And then I have used cute little A6 Christmas craft die, the Merry Little Christmas. This set comes with 3 dies. You cut out the whole sentiment all at once. On this particular card, I've just cut out 2 of the layers and added that to the card. This one, I've added 3 layers. They're quite self-explanatory. Just die cut them and just really with the different colours to coordinate. And let's say it creates such an impact on your card that you really don't need a huge amount more on that. And I will, again, just with postage in mind, I'm just going to attach that flat to the front of the card there, just off centre a little bit so I can see the aperture. So that's, say, basically the same card, slightly different colours, so they look slightly different. Now what I will do now, I will show you just how this card comes together, because this is the aperture card. I do have to just wipe my I do just have to clean my stencil just quickly, so just give me a quick chance to look at your comments there. How are you doing, Julie? Am I doing a job? Am I able to cheer you up this afternoon? I do hope so. Hi, Beverly. Hi, Connie. I'm sure, Connie, do you have this set as well? Let's say, I can't remember when this came out. It's quite a while ago now. So it's it's a good one to have had to actually build up those early Christmas stock that you have. I'm just going to give this a quick wipe as well. And then I can bring my ultimate back in, and again I can bring in another piece of cardstock which I've already pre-cut, and I can just get going with this really quickly. So again, I just need to, now this card is an awful lot quicker, so I can just line that up underneath. Now this time I will use yellow again, actually, in the centre. So I didn't actually need to have cleaned that off after all, did I? So use the centering of that. That's the interference ink, so we have a nice sparkly centre. I mean, equally, you can add nice gemstones to the centre of these as well, which I have done on this card, and that will give you just that little bit of dimension too. So I think that would look lovely. Now this time round, I'm just going to use my anthracite ink. So I've got my anthracite brush. Now before I add any ink, I am just going to use the brush and see what I have on there already, because I really don't want this to be too bold. But obviously I do want it to create an effect, and it looks like I already have enough ink on there. So I can just go over this really quickly. Again, you can add your magnets just to secure that if you really want to. There's elements of the flower that I might want to concentrate on more, and then the rest of it I can just stroke the brush over the rest of the design there. Now it could be that you might actually want to try this technique with one of the other more neutral colours. If you don't have the anthracite, we do have cobblestone, which I think would make really lovely look. It's a really nice warm colour. I'm just going to concentrate the ink a little bit around the centre of the flowers again. But you can see this time around I'm being far less fussy with how the ink's going down. And if I just take that away, you can see that that's created a really subtle effect in the background, and you don't necessarily need to do any more to create that detail. Now I know I've just moved that, but I can easily line that up like so. So perhaps add a little bit more ink on here, but you'll notice I haven't actually picked up any anthracite from the ink pad at all, and I've made a couple of cards just on the basis of what is left on this brush already. So by adding that, you can see that this is turning out to be really subtle, but what you can do, having a really subtle background like this, you can really go to town with your other details on there. And I'm going to be using a far bolder card base. Now I'm just lining that up because I know that I've moved it with all the chat that I'm doing to you. So when I lay this down, make sure I have that the right way around, because I'm chatting and not concentrating. So yes, I want my number facing upwards, so I'm just looking for my number 3 there, so I know that I can lay that down, and that's the right way now. So what I can do is just work into the center of the flowers. Again, we want just a really subtle veining of the flowers. Hopefully there's enough ink still on my brush to be able to do that, and I shall just pull that away in a second. But what I was saying, because this is going to be a really delicate layer, it means that you can put this against some bold matting and layering, which will really make it pop. So you really don't always need to go to town. You see there, just with what was left on the brush, I mean, you can get so much use out of what's on the brush. Don't underestimate how much these ink these brushes hold. That is enough for me. That is just so pretty with just that tiny pop of yellow. So again, what I need to do, I just need to emboss and die cut this. Obviously it does both jobs at the same time. So make sure we line that up. And do you know what, if you don't line it up quite right, I mean, just like other collections that Lisa has, it doesn't always matter. You know, these are actually very forgiving. Now, obviously, with this one in particular, you do have the aperture, so you'd obviously want to be a bit more conscious of that. But again, even so, there's a good clearance around all of the design details, which does allow you just that little bit of wiggle room. Okay, let's move that out of the way. So Connie, yeah, I think it's definitely worth doing, isn't it, Connie? Just lining those numbers with a Sharpie pen or something like that. It's not something I've got round to doing, I must admit. So again, we die cuts out of there perfectly. It's just got caught. There we are. I really like it with this anthracite colour. I mean, I'm a bit of a blue fiend anyway. It's one of my favourite colours, so that's what I would always lean towards going to. So this time round, again, I'm using a blue card blank because I want to create an aperture. So my card blank comes to me like so. To create the aperture is actually quite easy with this. There's not too much lining up to do. What you need to do, open up your card blank, obviously, because you only need to cut onto the front side. And because I'm making a 6x6 card, it fits perfectly in the 6x6 folder, obviously. So you have your card blank. This is going to be your front of your card blank. So you hold your embossing folder the right way round, and then you just pop that over the top of your card blank. Line it all up nicely and square that up to the front of the card. So, which means you need to put the top of the card blank at the top of the embossing folder, and you can see that that sits in there perfectly all the way around. So where you can run that through the embossing machine, obviously with your card open, and you only need to run it halfway. So when you take that out of your embossing machine, you have your aperture cut. Yes, you do have embossing as well. So the front of this card will actually be quite thick and it feel quite substantial, but that's not too much of a worry. So then you can close your card blank down. So you have a lovely card blank as it is. I mean, you can use it like that without any other decoration if you wanted to. And you can always put the aperture, a sentiment straight on like that if you wanted, or you could put it in the center. You could, and I'm going off piste a little bit here. You could, again, just use it like this. You could get your falling snow or any other lighter ink, depending on, as well on the card blank that you're using, and just highlight the top of that embossing with your ink and do it that way. I'd have to work at that. There we go. It's picking that up again. Maybe using a smaller brush, but then if you're using a white card and you're doing that like this, you can add any colour over the top of that. Add your sentiment, and then you have a card and you're away you can go. I wanted to add a matten layer behind what I've stenciled, so I cut myself a piece of the Euphoria cardstock. I measured it so that it adds a nice matten layer around what I'd already stenciled. Again, no measuring, I do all of this by eye. Because of that matten layer is still smaller than the embossing folder, I was then able to line this up in the embossing folder, make sure it sits centrally, and then I was able to die cut that, and we're left with this, and the glitter card is now embossed and we have our aperture in there, and I'll show you it's embossed. You'll be able to see it more from the reverse there. Now this aperture obviously now lines up with the aperture on your card blank, and it lines up with the aperture on the layer that you stenciled. So all of those apertures line up together, which gives you a nice clean window on your card blank. So you can leave your aperture open like so if you glued it all down, and again you could put your sentiment on the front of the aperture like so. You still have the dimension because you can see through. You can put your sentiment on the inside, so you have an open aperture like so. Again, there's loads of different ways of doing this, or if you wanted to enclose your aperture, again, just give you another option, I suppose. You could take a piece of acetate. You want to cut this so that it's, I would say, the same size as your matten layer there. But if it was to be the same size as your matten layer there, then it would work also. You can either use your aperture, your stenciled layer, put your acetate behind and put that straight onto your card blank, and you line up the apertures. So it's really tricky to show you like this, but hopefully you can see that. So there's a couple of different ways you can actually sandwich your acetate. You can put your acetate on first. You can add your matten layer and then do it that way. So if I just start building this, I'll glue this down. When you glue a layer that has an aperture in it, make sure that you put the glue around the outside of the aperture as well, because that will just prevent any gapping, which sometimes may occur, and it just makes sure that the strength of the card is sort of kept. So we have our matten layer like that. Now we can add our acetate to the back of this. Now, did I take off the... What you do need to make sure before you add your acetate is that you've taken off the protective film, which I haven't. You can usually tell because it's a little bit cloudier than you would expected it to be. I mean, Lisa's acetate is crystal clear once you've taken off the protective film. So I'll just square that up. And then we have our 3 layers. We'd then be ready to add this layer to the front of the cardstock. Now, it may be worth at some stage also using double-sided tape, because sometimes just adhering layers to the glitter card, it can take a little while. It does take eventually, but you do have to be a little bit patient just to make sure the glue goes off before you start moving around. But I think that's worked well. And you can see that I've opened up the card there just to make sure that the aperture is clear and all the apertures are all lined up perfectly. So again, this is another way to create the card. You can put your aperture on the inside, or you can have that open and put that onto the front as well. And again, I've just used 2 layers from the die set on this one to create the sentiment there. So I might leave that off. I'll decide later as to where I put that on. You can see on this one here that I've actually put that on the inside in the contrast colour, and it works really well with the centre of the flowers there. So they really are quite straightforward and simple cards today, but they are so quick to put together once you get going with them. You can create lots of different effects and just change up the colours a little bit and experiment. I mean, not all poinsettias have to be red. You can have a little bit of artistic license, I think, and go with your blue or your anthracite there as well. If you look back on samples on Pinterest that the design team have done, I think there's some green ones as well, which look stunning with the little robin that you can nest on the front of that as well. So by all means, have a play with what you put in the aperture as well. There's other poinsettia flowers which you can die cut and put in the centre and decoupage on. You can use the robin. You don't always actually even have to emboss and die cut. You can use one of your nesting circles and just put that across the front also, and that will give you a really nice background too. So there are lots of different ways that you can use this particular set. Now, as always, this will always be available for you to watch on YouTube. So I'm hoping the person who wanted to see this in action will have a chance to catch up with that. If not, I might just look back on in the group and see where her message is and just check that she was able to see that. I'm back with you on Thursday. I won't be doing Christmas. I think I've got an idea with an embossing folder to make a birthday card as well for a young lad. So that's what I'll leave you. That's what I'll be doing on Thursday with you. I'm so glad my setup worked today. So I'd like to, it'd be handy to know if you couldn't hear me or if I just needed to adjust something just a little bit for Thursday. But if not, everything is looking all okay with me, and hopefully the picture quality was a lot better for you compared to other weeks. So I shall look back on all your comments now. Thanks so much for joining me this afternoon, and I shall see you all again on Thursday. Take care, everyone.